I should apologize. When I started this whole thing, the filming thing, I didn't know exactly what I was doing, and I definitely reached out to Destiny to get some pointers and things, but I didn't go out of my way to make this good. And I didn't think too much of it. I just thought, I'll throw it up. And then Andrew saw it, and he's kind of been on this whole filming thing lately. And apparently I've been doing some things wrong. And he's been happy to tell me. At this point, I don't know if I'm going to change him, because I've got a few dozen videos out now. And so I'm sorry that things are not as good as they could be.
Took you long enough.
Yeah, good thing you chose an easy spot.
Chapter 20. I closed the door to the Keltis, deadbolting the lock by siren as I strolled out to the stables. Blaze was there, and I didn't have a lot of time, and I said, "Hey, we're going on a mission. I can't bring you because we have to be stealthy, but do you want to ride me to the platform?" Blaze whinnied and turned for me to get on his back, so I hopped on, and we took off down the street. It was good to spend any time that I could with Blaze. We made our way to the traveling platform, which we'd constructed not too long before. Oh, I forgot. I also had a conversation with Destiny before I left. He didn't want me to go because we were going to the world of trust, where I wouldn't be able to sire, and Destiny was worried about me, but I'd been training. And besides, I needed to get out. I hadn't actually traveled for 2 weeks, and I needed to do something. And Destiny, he said, "You've been doing something. You've been up to a lot." And I said, "Yeah, I'd cleared out 5 different settlements in the last 5 weeks, going around with the Seer Guard and the Travel Guard, as we were starting to call them, the Travelers." But it wasn't the same, and I needed to go out to a different world. And Destiny did not like that. He was like, "You won't be able to sire." But I had been training. Not as much as I would have liked, but I could hold my own. The thing with Earth was not going to happen again. I was sure of that. So I decided to go, despite what Destiny said. When I made my way out, Blaze took me to the traveling platform and jumped up onto the platform. It was like 5 feet up from the street itself. It was just off of the main thoroughfare between the Keltis and the village. And we got up onto the big stone platform. It was massive and flat, just a place to send off missions, because we were doing so many things and our travelers were so busy. It was nice to have a single place, and it had ISO crystal built into it to make it easier to travel from as well, which was nice. But we got there, and there were a few dozen men already, well, men and women, gathered ready for the mission. And they seemed to perk up when they saw me and Blaze. I was something of a symbol to them, which I wasn't their leader. That was Sestian. These were military people that we were working with, but they still saw me as their leader. A 17-year-old boy ruling Saramea, which, I mean, if I could take down Demayas Cry, then we sure as Juke could take down the Profithians. So I guess that was a symbol of sorts. But anyway, I turned to the men and women. I'm just going to say men. But I turned to the troops and I said, "Are you all ready?" And yeah, they were ready to go. And I said, "This is going to be tough." So we've got 6 teams of 6, and we're going to take down the generators on the world of trust. Now remember, this world is full of seers, which is both good and bad. They'll interfere with each other's siring, but if you catch one on its own, it might be able to sire, and you do not want that. So just be careful, no matter what you do. They also have Erevin ISO, which we don't know a lot about. Be ready for anything, and just be cautious. The men nodded, they were ready. Darren was leading 3 of the teams of 6, and Ferranda was leading 3 of the other 3. And they had roles within each of those teams, and I let them make sure that they knew what was going on, and Scar wasn't there yet. I figured that she would be late, but now we're just waiting for her. I thanked Blaze and let him trot off as I turned to meet some of the other men, some of the other Ceremans. Some of them were native Ceremans, others had been born to people who had been taken by the Profithians, so they weren't the Ceremayan race that looked like humans, but they were all still Ceremans. It wasn't too long, though, before Scar came. She came down from the sky and slammed down on the stone platform, and I said, "Oh, that looked like that hurt." She stood up and knocked her knee. She said, "Reinforced bones comes with the super strength." As she walked past, she said, "But I totally thought this thing was made of wood. Just give me a minute." And I said, "The whole thing is stone gray." And she said, "I thought it was painted." But I gave her a minute and went to talk with the librarian that was with us. The gate library was, full and running, and we had a team of travelers that were running it. And they were the ones that would bring the gates that we needed for our missions and would send us through. And I talked with Itero, a middle-aged traveler who she'd received some good training from Scar herself, and is one of the main librarians who was tasked with sending us out on our missions. And she was ready to go. Our men were ready to go. And so we went. And Itero held the gate in front of her and closed her eyes, overlapping the 2 worlds. As she did, the Zelen ISO that was built into the platform began to glow. It was framed in concentric circles, 8 crystals within the first few circles and then 16 in the outer circles. And they all shone green up from the platform as she sired and brought the 2 worlds together. And she sent the rest of us through, waiting on the far side to keep the gates safe. The rest of us came through to a humid world that smelled of pine. It was dark and dim. Not much was visible through the thick fog that carried the place, just a green glow to one side, where we could tell that the Profithian settlement was. I could feel it was there because Destiny couldn't tell much in that direction because of all the seers that were there. But we made our way along. The 2 teams split up and went opposite sides so that, if any of the teams were caught, we wouldn't be able to compromise the others. We'd all be fairly split off. And Scar and I were left stalking forward. And we crouched down in the moist underbrush. And for a minute, I just appreciated the pine trees around me. They were tall, and the branches didn't even start until 25 feet up. It was just this picturesque feel. I'd have to get some seeds on the way back for my garden. But anyway, Scar and I crept down into the underbrush till we came up to a little point that came down where we could see the beginnings of the settlement. Everything seemed to be made of wood, and there was a tall, like, pike-like fence on the front, and lots of red lights all throughout the city, the Erevin ISO that the Profithians used. And Scar said, "What are we doing again?" I said, "Scar, did you not listen during the meetings?" And she said, "No, I just know I go on missions to take people out, and I know you'll tell me the rest of it." I rolled my eyes, but I said, "We're just here in case. The other teams are doing the main work because the council doesn't want us too involved to keep us safe, but we're here in case or to make a distraction if needs be." Scar said, "I can do that." And I said, "Speaking of the other troops," I pulled up, or I tapped my earbud to reach out and see how the other teams were doing. I said, "How are we doing?" Nothing came back. I thought, well, that's weird, and I tried again to contact them. Nothing came through. Scar narrowed her eyes, and she said, "I'm going to check on something real quick." And she crept up and, well, I looked back and she was gone through the mist. And I settled back down to listen and watch, and realized there was a wildlife that I hadn't noticed before. They were little red lights. They weren't bugs, but they were some kind of creature. Not Profithian anything, just a part of the world. These little red lights that danced through the fog between the pine trees, curling up into the treetops or nestling down into the underbrush. I watched one as it lazily made its way along, but then zipped back. I looked where it had come. I saw Profithian coming through the trees. I pulled myself up, drawing Talonthorn, and the Profithian stopped just as a laser blast came through. Green would have been from Scar. It shot toward the Profithian, who raised a staff that was topped with a red crystal. It spun the staff, and the moment the laser hit the staff, it dissipated, disappearing. And the Profithian turned back to me with the staff. I was coming up and nearly on him by the time he'd blocked Scar's attack. And I tried to chop the top off of his staff, because it seemed like that's where the power was coming from. But he deftly avoided my attack and threw me to the ground. I didn't have siring, and I still wasn't a very good fighter. But I was able to dodge his attack as he tried to get me with the staff. By this point, Scar was running up. She'd drawn her lightsaber, and she had a halo of light blue around her through the fog as she raced toward the Profithian. And I flashed back with Talonthorn and caught it in the side, cutting its colorful robe and cutting into its skin as it cried out. And Scar was almost on top of it as it reached out and threw out a cloud of red dust. I wasn't able to sire to push it away, and so I got caught in the cloud of red dust, and Scar did too. I could see as she slammed into the Profithian, and both of them fell to the ground. And I tried to stumble away, but fell unconscious. When I came to, I was bound, my hands and my feet tied together, and I was hanging upside down from the rafters of a log room. I looked to my side, and Scar was there as well, hanging upside down and bound with the same rough cords that I was bound with. My head ached, and it was hard to focus. I wasn't sure if it was because of all of the blood that was rushing to my head, or if it was something with the red ISO that seemed to beat against my mind and pulse there. But regardless, I was a little bit out of sorts as I watched a Profithian tapped the back of Scar's head with a red crystal, and her eyes shot open and she began to struggle against the bonds. She must have been close, because the Profithian tapped the back of her head again and she fell limp, her hair nearly brushing the floor as she hung. A Profithian from the front of the room said, "So one voice speaks for all." Its voice did not translate well through the earbuds, but I looked forward, and there was a Profithian sitting at the front of the room in front of a bowl that shone with red light. There must have been liquid in it as well, because it was a shifting red light of sorts. The Profithian wore a robe that was almost as ornate as Firusin Iafotheva's, much more ornate than the one that had attacked us in the forest. But unlike Firusin Iafotheva, this Profithian's face was painted with white and grey that almost made it look like a warped skull. But the Prophithian said, "You came with people. Say their place or all is lost." And I said, "I feel like all would be lost if I were to tell you. All the same, Scar and I came alone." And the Prophithian made a tisking sound with its mouth and said something that didn't translate. And then it said, "All who come can peace, but you tempt the beast." I said, "Sorry, that one didn't really translate through." And the Prophithian stood. I think she was female, based off of her voice. And she said, "Fire and fur will take you, lone one. Where are your people?" And I was actually surprised that one translated through better. But I said, "We are alone. We just came to see what was here." And the Prophithian made a hacking sound, and I felt something touch the back of my head. For the second time that day, I fell unconscious. End of chapter 20.